Greetings in the name of Yeshua. I'm Dr. Noreen Jacks. Thank you for joining me for another Take 5. It's time for another word study, spiritual and cultural insight from the original languages of the Bible. Our term today is Karath, meaning to cut covenant. We have an example of this in the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis chapter 15, verses 9 and 10. So Yahweh said to Abraham, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer and a 3-year-old female goat and a 3-year-old ram and a turtle dove and a young pigeon." And then he brought all of these to him and cut them in two and laid each half opposite the other, but he did not cut the birds. Here we have bloody sacrificial offerings. These were the key elements of the covenant. We see the same phrase, Karath Barit, in Genesis chapter 15, verse 8. On that day the Lord made a covenant, Karath Barit, with Abraham, saying, "To your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates." In 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 3, we have the covenant being cut between David and Jonathan. Let's see if it's also a blood covenant. Then Jonathan made a covenant, Karath Barit, with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David with his armor, including his sword and his bow and his belt. Covenants were normally cut between two enemies, two tribes, or two nations. Abraham and God were enemies until they cut covenant. The book of James refers to Abraham as friend of God in chapter 2, verse 23. They did not become friends until after the cutting of the covenant. David and Jonathan, however, were already best friends. Why did they cut covenant? Well, Jonathan was the crown prince of Israel at this time, and as we just read, he surrendered his royal robe, his armor, his sword, his belt, and his bow, all symbols of surrendering his throne to David. Why would Jonathan do such a thing? Obviously, Jonathan recognized the powerful anointing of God upon David to be the next king of Israel, and he cut covenant with him to reaffirm his loyalty. A dramatic historical event such as this demanded a formal covenant. There are questions. Was this a blood covenant? There was no mention of blood in the passage that I read, at least not in the English passage. Did this covenant involve a blood sacrifice? According to the English translation, no mention of blood. But according to the Hebrew, yes, there is a mention of blood. Because karat means to cut, to kill, or to destroy. In the image here of the Akedah, you see Abraham about to cut his son, about to do this sacrifice, to make this covenant with God, and the angel mercifully stops him. The verb karat indicates that there was indeed a blood sacrifice, and history and tradition also confirm the Hebrew translation. But sadly, this is missed in the English translation, and I was very excited the first time I discovered it from the Hebrew. That's why I encourage everybody to learn at least a little bit of Hebrew, because it will open up the Bible to you. As I say, it'll make it a pop-up book. There's a collection of Bronze Age knives on display at the Woodland Museum of Biblical Archaeology in Woodland, California, where I serve as a docent. Abraham would have used such a knife during the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, particularly the knife that is closest to the center of the screen, the long, green, oxidized-looking knife from the Bronze Age, the time of Abraham. The Hebrew scriptures may be the origin of the phrase "to cut a deal," because in antiquity, the blood sealed the deal. Native American blood brothers had a similar ritual. Cutting covenant was a universal tradition in antiquity, and I encourage you to view my series, The Threshold Covenant, and also my series, Abraham, Friend of God. In both of these, I discuss the benefits of covenant relationship, and they were life-changing for me, the research that I did for these series. The shed blood of the innocent sacrifice was a reminder that death would come to a disloyal partner who dared to break the sacred covenantal bond. Yeshua also cut covenant for the salvation of the entire world, and he alone paid the penalty for the broken covenant. In John 3:16 we learn that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Thank you for joining me for Take 5. Until next time, Shalom.